The morning light spilled over the frontier like a slow blessing, drifting golden through the rising dust, as if the sun itself paused to breathe. A lone rider moved across that hush, shoulders drawn, head bowed slightly, not in defeat, but in the weight of a man who had carried too much for too long. Elias Crow looked carved from the miles behind him. Dust on his coat, sorrow in his eyes, and silence pressed deep into the spaces between each breath. Some men ride into towns chasing fortune or trouble. Elias arrived, trying to remember he still deserved a place among the living. A black stallion screamed inside the corral as he passed, hooves tearing at the dirt, muscles trembling under a hide as dark as coal. The sight halted Elias like a memory cutting through him. The horse was wild, fury-bound, a creature that trusted nothing, not even itself. For a moment, Elias felt an odd kinship, as though the animal carried a wound shaped exactly like his own. A woman approached the corral then, commanding the dust around her with nothing more than presence. Mara Delaney, the widow of the town, whispered about. Her hair was tied back with work-worn hands, her face touched by wind and worry. People said her late husband died trying to break that very stallion. They said she held on to the ranch only because she was too stubborn to let grief take what land hadn't already stolen. Elias felt the weight of those whispers floating around her, as if gossip were another ghost she carried. When he asked around for work, the townsfolk gave him half laughs, half pity. If it's real cowboy work you want, they said, try the Delaney place. 20 men tried that beast and ended up dust. But Mara didn't laugh when Elias walked up to her fence. She didn't pity him either. She watched him with a gaze both guarded and searching, as though reading the places inside him he tried to keep hidden. You want work? She said softly, though there was steel under the words. If you're a real cowboy, prove it on my stallion. Elias stood silent for a long moment, not because he doubted the challenge. He doubted himself. His past lay behind him like a scar that still bled. Once he tried to save a child from a burning barn, but the horse beneath him panicked and threw him. He survived. The child didn't. That failure followed him like a shadow, refusing to step aside, its weight turning every quiet moment into a reminder. He had never forgiven himself. He wasn't sure he ever would. And now here stood a widow needing a miracle, and a stallion whose spirit burned like a caged wildfire. He stepped toward the corral with a resolve he didn't fully feel. The stallion snorted sharply, eyes rolling white. The crowd forming near the fence leaned in, already expecting to see him thrown. Elias approached anyway, trying to steady his breath, trying to steady his shaking hands. He didn't touch the horse. He barely had the chance. The stallion lunged, reared, and with one thunderous twist, sent Elias crashing into the dirt. Dust rose in a bitter cloud around him as laughter rippled through the watchers. Mara didn't laugh. She didn't help him up either. She simply watched with something unreadable in her eyes, maybe disappointment, maybe curiosity, maybe hope trying not to be hope. That night, after the crowd drifted back to their houses and the wind settled into its cold evening song, Elias sat alone by the wooden fence. The stallion stood at the far end of the corral, staring at him like a challenge once thrown but not accepted. Elias rubbed the dirt off his palms and let the silence fold around him. He wondered why he stayed. He wondered why the widow's voice lingered in his mind. If you're a real cowboy, prove it. Soft footsteps approached. Mara stood there with a tin cup of water. She didn't offer comfort, just presence. My husband rushed him, she said quietly, setting the cup down near him. Maybe you don't have to. It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't even encouragement. But something in her tone, something almost tender, fell across Elias like the first warm day after winter. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Her small act of grace settled deeper than words. The next morning, gossip spun through town like tumbleweed. People muttered that he should leave before he embarrassed himself again. Others joked that Mara needed to sell the ranch before that devil horse dragged her into another grave. Elias heard them, and the words carved something raw inside him. He didn't know Mara Delaney, not truly, but something about the way she stood alone against the world stirred a protective ache in him he couldn't explain. At dawn, he stepped into the corral again, but this time he didn't try to mount. He simply sat in the dirt, letting the wind move around him, letting the stallion notice him on its own terms. Hours passed. The world slowed until only breath mattered. His breath, the horse's breath, the quiet rhythm of patience. The stallion circled him, tail swishing, nostrils flaring. Elias kept still, whispering softly, not to the horse, but to the hurt he carried. I'm not here to break anything. From behind the barn, Mara watched with her hand resting against the wood. She saw in Elias something few men possessed anymore. Gentleness disguised as grit. Patience forged from loss rather than pride. And for the first time in many months, she felt her heart shift toward hope instead of resignation. Night arrived with a cold hush. Mara brought him a lantern, the warm glow softening the edges of her tired face. She sat on the fence, close enough to share silence, but far enough to keep her heart safe. Elias told her nothing of his past, but she sensed the shadows in him. She told him about the ranch's debts, about the fear that the land would be taken from her. The words came haltingly, as though she hadn't spoken her worries aloud in years. You don't owe me anything, she said at last. He didn't answer, but the quiet he gave her felt like a vow. At dawn he tried again. This time the stallion led him near enough to breathe against his hands. Warm breath tickled his palm, and Elias felt something inside him loosen, as though forgiveness long denied brushed against his bones. Word spread. People gathered. Mara stood a distance away, arms crossed, trying not to let hope swallow her whole. Elias stepped toward the stallion with the steadiness of a man walking into church. He reached up, slow as prayer, and pressed his forehead gently against the horse's. The stallion trembled, but didn't bolt. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them, two beings trying to trust again. Then Elias swung onto the stallion's back. Silence ripped through the crowd. Even the wind held its breath. The stallion surged forward, a wild storm of muscle and fire. Dust rose behind them like smoke from a burning past. Elias held on not with force, but with surrender, letting the horse choose its path, letting trust guide where strength once failed him. The two moved as if stitched together by something deeper than training, deeper than will. The stallion bucked once, twice, then broke into a full gallop across the open field. Mara's breath trembled as she watched. Her hands pressed to her lips. Something like a prayer rose in her chest. Finally, the stallion slowed, then stopped. The great creature lowered its head to Elias's chest, not in defeat, but in acceptance. The crowd erupted, disbelief rolling through them like thunder. Elias slid down and rested a hand against the stallion's neck. For the first time in years, he felt whole. Mara walked toward him, every step careful, as though approaching a dream. My husband couldn't gentle him, she whispered, voice breaking. But you saw him. She laid her hand on the stallion, then on Elias's arm, a gesture soft as morning light. Something mended in both of them in that moment, quiet as a breath. And if you're listening now out there somewhere between your own hurts and hopes, remember this. Life will hand you a wild horse sooner or later. A fear, a memory, a wound you don't know how to tame. Strength isn't about proving yourself to anyone. It's about sitting with what scares you and letting trust grow slow as dawn. If the world has thrown you down 20 times, if you feel judged or forgotten, think of Elias Crow. Dust yourself off. Sit quietly. Let healing come on its own time. Your moment, your slow, steady, honest moment, will return.